This is your ultimate stop for everything sports. The Golden State Media Concepts Sports Podcast. Should I say more? From the NFL, MLB, the NBA to MMA, it's all in here. The Golden State Media Concepts Sports Podcast. Listen now.
Hello and welcome back to the GSMC Sports Podcast, brought to you by the GSMC Podcast Network. I am your host, Alex Masford. Thank you so much for tuning into today's episode and to be continuing to listen to the show. If you are a returning listener, we really do appreciate you. I hope you all had a happy holiday. I hope you all had a good, New Year's, everything like that. We got a lot to talk about in today's episode. Before I start talking anything sports, I want to remind you all of a couple of things. First of all, please subscribe to the podcast if you haven't done so already. You can do it really easily, really quickly. Just go to the main page of our show, the GSMC Sports Podcast, and whatever you're listening to this on, Podbean, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, and you'll see probably in the top right-hand corner-ish, or maybe even dead center, a little button that just has a plus sign next to it and also says subscribe. If you could hit that button for us, that would mean the absolute world to us. You want to subscribe to the podcast for a couple of reasons, but the main one being you want to get those alerts and those notifications on your phone, on your laptop, on your watch, on whatever device you might be listening to this on. And again, you'll get those alerts and notifications, and you'll know when we drop a new episode of the GSMC Sports Podcast. When we release it, you won't have to go look at Twitter or just go, check casually. You'll get those alerts whenever they are released, and then you can, be one of the first people to listen to a new episode again when we release it. So please, if you could subscribe to the podcast on our main page, whatever application or even website you're listening to this on, Spotify, Apple Music, Podbean, please subscribe to us on all those great platforms. We would really appreciate it. Again, please subscribe to the podcast. Also, don't forget to leave us a 5-star review or just a positive review in general if you are enjoying the content and discussion points of the show, the production, everything that goes on behind the scenes with our great team as well. So if you're just enjoying the show overall, we'd love it if you leave us a 5-star review or just a positive review in general on that same main page, on that same website or application. Again, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, or Podbean. You can leave us a review. If you want to write something, you can do that as well, but as long as you just leave us a positive review or just a 5-star review, we would really appreciate that if you are enjoying the content of this show just in general. So again, please don't forget to subscribe to the podcast and leave us a positive review or just a 5-star review, in general, anything like that. And finally, don't forget to follow us on all social media platforms. Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram is where you can primarily follow us. Over there, we can talk about, the Heisman Trophy ceremony that's happening tonight. When you're listening to this, we can talk about the NFL playoffs, which of course I'm going to get into. The NBA season is about a week or so in right now, a couple weeks in. Some teams are, 5 games in. Some teams are 8 games in. So there's a lot of sports going on right now. We went through a period with COVID and everything where sports really weren't going on, but now we got everything back. We got football playoffs in full swing. The NBA season is officially underway. Everything going on with that as well. And only more sports are going to be added. The hockey season is around the corner, and of course baseball as well when they get things kicked off in the spring with spring training and everything like that. So you're going to want to follow us on all social media platforms, Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram, so you can interact with us with breaking news and just sort of overall, everything sports. So again, Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram is where you can primarily follow us, and we would absolutely love it if you could follow us on all of those great social media platforms. I hope wherever you are and however you may be listening, you and your family are happy and healthy during these extremely trying times in the world today. And of course, I hope you had a happy holidays, no matter what you celebrate or what you believe in. I hope it was a good enjoyment time for you and your family. We have a lot to talk about today. It's going to be mostly NFL. The NFL regular season is officially wrapped up. I want to talk about as much as that as I can. And the NBA season, I will get to at the end. I want to give you my top 10 teams. That's coming at the very end of the episode. But before we get into that, I am going to talk about, Doug Peterson deciding to pull Jalen Hurts out of that Sunday night game that had big playoff implications for Washington and the Giants, who obviously weren't playing in that game. I'll give my 2 cents on that. What did I think about that? I want to start off as well with some teams that I think that can win the Super Super Bowl. I want to also give you maybe who I think should win that Most Valuable Player award. I want to get into Tua Tagovailoa, his, what some people would call disastrous start. There's been some rumors, some people talking about should the Miami Dolphins take a quarterback again in this year's class. I'll get into my 2 cents about that as well. We'll get into everything NFL, end of regular season, as well as playoffs, who I think can win the Super Bowl. We'll get into that in the show. And at the very end of the show, I am going to give you my top 10 NBA teams at this point. I had a really tough time making this list. The NBA season is off to a really weird start. Some of these teams who traditionally are not doing as well, just historically the last 15, 20 years, come off the hot starts. Cleveland, Orlando, Phoenix. I want to get into all of that good stuff at the end of the show. I'll be giving you my top 10 NBA teams. It's going to be a little weird because of the record-wise, but I'll explain myself and tell you why I have those 10 teams being the top 10 teams in the NBA. That's coming at the very end of the show. But the first thing I want to start off with is the number one takeaway I had once Week 17 ended in the National Football League. And that takeaway for me had to be the fact that I think the Super Bowl champion is coming out of the AFC this year. I saw what happened in the NFC this year. I wasn't super, impressed with some of the playoff teams that got in. Obviously, Chicago got in over, Arizona, who I really thought would get in, who I'll get into later about Cliff Kingsbury and my stance on him. I thought Arizona would get in. The Rams look a little bit beaten up, and Goff's dealing with the thumb injury. Can you trust the Saints in the playoffs, given everything that's been going on, recently with them blowing leads and them losing to the Vikings, I think last year, and then obviously the Minnesota Miracle, then losing to the Rams in the year in between those two losses. So I don't know how much I trust the Saints going forward, especially with their ability, or their lack of ability to throw over the top. Again, they're just not really trustworthy in the playoffs. Seattle, I like a lot. They were my pick to go to the Super Bowl at the beginning of the year. But all of a sudden, the defense is inconsistent, the offensive line's inconsistent, and really the whole team overall is really inconsistent just from a standpoint of offensive firepower, really, which is crazy thing about Russell Wilson. Tampa Bay Buccaneers, they're hot and cold. They really look hot right now, but Tom Brady has never won back-to-back road playoff games in his career, and the only home game he would get in the playoffs at all would be the Super Bowl. So it's unclear how they're going to do, but the two teams that I think are going to win the Super Bowl, so one of these two teams will win the Super Bowl in my opinion, actually going back to the NFC, Green Bay, I like them a lot this year. They're probably my favorite coming out of the NFC, which is lame due to their record. I know it's a lame take, but I don't trust their defense that much, their run defense in particular. I like their secondary, don't love it. I love Jair Alexander. Everybody else, not so sure of. I love Aaron Rodgers and everything like that, but we know, things can be inconsistent in the playoffs sometimes with them. They could get bounced as well. So I don't love the NFC. I think there's two teams that can win a Super Bowl right now. I look at the entire landscape of the NFL. There's a lot of good teams this year, specifically in the AFC. I think there's a lot of teams with really bright futures. I don't think the bottom of the NFL is nearly as big as it's been in years past. Even last year, I know when I think of really bad teams in the NFL this year, think of Jacksonville, I think of the Jets, and even they found a way to win a couple of games in the end. I think of Houston, not a ton, Cincinnati, but then you talk about Burrow not being there, things like that. Then when you see the draft order with, teams at 9 and 10 who won 6, 7, 8 games even, it's tough this year. And again, look at the Miami Dolphins who are 10 and 6 and they're not even picking in the 20s. So there was a really big year for the NFL this year. Obviously everything with COVID still playing through all of that, up until this point, I should say the season is still going. There's just a lot of good teams this year. I felt like there used to be a lot of just crap teams in the NFL that didn't have answers at quarterback, that didn't know how they were going to get out of their rut. Even Cleveland made the playoffs this year. There's a future. Feels like a lot of teams have their answer at QB, at least going forward. I know that'll change every 3 years. Teams question their quarterback decisions after one bad year, one bad series, one bad game. But there was a lot of good teams this year. And but when I look at it, there's only two teams, in my opinion, that seem so complete when it talks about front office, coach, defense, even specifics, quarterback, receivers, line, defensive line, secondary, coaching, front office, general manager, stability, even fan base, home crowd, whatever you want to talk about. There's only two teams I think can win a Super Bowl. Those two teams, in my opinion, are obviously the Kansas City Chiefs, who you guys know I love. I've said they're the number one team in the NFL all season long. The only team that I think can also win a Super Bowl is the Buffalo Bills. And I know you're going to call me crazy. The Buffalo Bills are still young. This is first year of the Allen and Diggs partnership. And yes, we all can acknowledge Josh Allen has had a great year, but can he turn around from being one of the most least accurate quarterbacks in the NFL? Again, Up until this season, he had a 27% chance of throwing an uncatchable ball. That's what he had his first 2 years in the league. Now we're talking about him as an MVP candidate, which I believe he will be. You could argue he should win the MVP. I'd say Aaron Rodgers, but definitely second place in my opinion would go to Josh Allen. And when you talk about that coaching staff, you talk about Brian Daboll as the offensive coordinator, you talk about Sean McDermott as the defensive coordinator, they have to be one of the most complete coaching staffs in the entire NFL. It wouldn't surprise me. I know Brian Daboll's going to get a head coaching job, for a matter of fact. It wouldn't surprise me at all if the defensive coordinator got hired too. So you're talking about 3 legitimate NFL head coaches, you could argue, on that coaching staff alone. Then, of course, you go to Kansas City. They have Patrick Mahomes, Tyreek Hill. I compare them to the Warriors all the time. Again, you remember that game against Miami? They were down 10-0. Then you blink, they're up 30-10. They have a winning record, went down double digits at any point during a game, which is absolutely ridiculous. They've lost one game, I think, since Christmas of 2019, which is also crazy to think about. Again, the Kansas City Chiefs, in my opinion, are still the number 1 team in the league, and I think they will win the Super Bowl, but I think Buffalo can, man, and we have to talk about Josh Allen. There's no most improved player award in the NFL. I really wish there was. I love that factor that the NBA has to it. So some of these guys who are maybe considered, not necessarily considered bust, but took a little bit more time developing, things like that. Josh Allen would be the poster child of most improved. In a league, in an era where we seem so quick to give up on our quarterbacks. Again, later on in the show, I'm going to be talking about if Miami should be moving off of Tua Tagovailoa, and we saw what happened to Josh Rosen, and then replaced by Kyler Murray. We've talked about, should the Giants get rid of Daniel Jones last year? We talked about, all of these young quarterbacks getting moved off of. Well, Baker Mayfield, I've talked about, should potentially be moved off of at the beginning of the year if he didn't have a good year this year, which he obviously did. And an era where we've so rushed to see the immediate success of rookie quarterbacks and just quarterbacks in general. We want to see them light it up like Herbert is right now, or Andrew Luck did, or RG3 did. We don't allow for the development enough. This league used to be, you sit for 2 years, then you play. Aaron Rodgers sat for 2 years. Peyton Manning threw 30 picks his rookie year. Troy Aikman was a disaster early on in his career. You got to give time for some of these guys to develop. Buffalo is showing what happens when you let guys develop. Josh Allen has gone from, quite literally, you could argue, a bottom 10 quarterback in the NFL last year. I argued he was holding that Buffalo team back due to his accuracy issues. Comes in one offseason, works with Jordan Palmer, works with, apparently, a rumored, had a conversation, got some pointers from Tony Romo, obviously Sean McDermott, Brian Daboll, that entire incredible coaching staff. And year 3, Josh Allen, you could argue, has been the second best quarterback in the NFL this year. You could argue that Aaron Rodgers has been the best quarterback this year. Josh Allen's number 2, and Patrick Mahomes is number 3. That's what I would argue to you. I'm not saying he's the best quarterback in the league. I'm not saying he's better than Mahomes. I'm not saying he's better than Watson or some of these other guys, Lamar. But I'm saying this season, this particular season, Josh Allen has been the second best quarterback in the NFL. And that's an undeniable fact. And that's coming from someone who absolutely dragged Josh Allen through the mud at the beginning of this year. I thought he was holding the Buffalo team back. I thought they would win, 10, 11 games maybe. They would win the AFC East due to it not being so strong. But I called Buffalo pretenders the entire year. I'm done with it. The Miami Dolphins defense that was playing for everything for their season in Week 17, the number 1 scoring defense in the NFL. The Buffalo Bills, with a combination of Josh Allen and Diggs, and then their backups eventually at the end, put up 56 points on them. Josh Allen, I think, had over 220 yards, and I think he might have had 3 touchdowns in the first half. Things like that are absolutely incredible, ridiculous when you're talking about going against Brian Flores, one of the best, maybe the Coach of the Year candidate this year. He will be a Coach of the Year candidate. Will he win? Potentially. You're talking about just the job that, Brian Daboll has done, who I think should be offered the Charger job already if he hasn't been. I don't want to hear about these interviews. He would be absolutely perfect. And besides Eric Bieniemy, and maybe even they're neck and neck at this point, Brian Daboll and Eric Bieniemy are the 2 top, I think, head coaching candidates out there. You can throw in a name like Urban Meyer if he's really available. It's sort of out of the blue. It's not, we don't really know just yet. But at the end of the day, man, credit to Josh Allen. He put in the work. He changed his mechanics. He's one of the most accurate quarterbacks in the league now. He went from, again, 27% chance of throwing an uncatchable ball his first 2 years in the league to having the most accurate season from a Buffalo Bill quarterback ever. He obviously had the best season a Buffalo Bill quarterback has ever had, and I'm not going to be surprised if they win the Super Bowl. This team is complete. Their defense is good. I thought it was better last year than it is this year, and I've seen some inconsistencies, but towards the tail end of the season, specifically, I think they're on a 6-game winning streak, and I think they're a Hail Mary away, that Hail Mary play with Kyler Murray, from winning 8 or 9 straight. They are the hottest team in football right now. Do not be surprised at all if they go to the Super Bowl and they win it. Do not be surprised at all if they find a way to beat Kansas City. I know they played earlier in the year, and I know Kansas City won, but that game is going to be closer than people give it credit for, and maybe the Chiefs turn it around. I would still, if I had to bet, say that the Chiefs are going to come out of the AFC and win the Super Bowl. But man, day by day, the more I think about Buffalo, the more I watch tape on Josh Allen, the more I look at Stephon Diggs too, man. Stephon Diggs went from, I don't think anybody even considered Stephon Diggs during his Viking days as the best receiver on his own team. People thought that Thielen was bettering, myself included, comes to Buffalo, becomes a number one guy, and now you have to argue that he was the best receiver in the NFL this year. I wouldn't say that. I mean, you could argue that he's had the best statistical season, but to leave him out of the top 5, at least conversation in the league, is blasphemous at this point. You have, Julio, Hopkins, you have Devontae Adams, and then Stephon Diggs is right up there with the rest of these guys. I truly believe that. Best route runner in the NFL, and you're talking about maybe a year ago before he got to Buffalo as him being the second best wide receiver on that Minnesota Viking team. Just a complete turnaround from this Buffalo Bill team. The city deserves it. Their fans are absolutely incredible. And man, what a story Josh Allen is. Me, a lot of other people ragged on him for his inaccuracy, holding Buffalo back. He'll never get better. He's just a stick in the mud sort of type of quarterback. He's big, athletic, but what are those tools, come out of, right? He has all the tools. That's a classic phrase in sports. He's got all the tools, but can he put it all together? You're seeing what happens when a guy like that puts it all together. You're seeing what happens when a project quarterback actually is allowed to develop and have time and go through struggles and make mistakes and throw picks and be inaccurate and lose playoff games for your team, barely beat Duck Hodges in Pittsburgh, lose to Houston in the first round of the playoffs, and then to turn around, in my opinion, be the second best team in football, only short of the Kansas City Chiefs, who just won a Super Bowl and you could argue are in the forefront of a complete NFL dynasty. Buffalo's an incredible story, man, incredible team. That was my number one takeaway this year, was the Bills were the biggest surprise of the NFL this year. I think a lot of people, including me, knew they were going to win that division. We didn't know how close Miami was. They appear closer than we think, but we didn't know how close they were. I told you New England wasn't going to be a very good football team this year, and we knew the Jets were going to stink. So we all kind of assumed Buffalo was going to win this division. They made the playoffs last year, everything like that, but nobody expected this. Nobody expected Josh Allen to be a top 3 quarterback in football this year. Nobody expected Sean McDermott to be a top 3 coach in football this year, and Brian Daboll might have been the best offensive coordinator in the league this year, past Eric Bieniemy, past some of these other guys. Absolutely ridiculous, absolutely incredible. Bills Mafia, I think they're getting some fans back for their home playoff game, which will be against, I think, the Indianapolis Colts on Saturday, I think. That's going to be fun to watch. Bills Mafia deserves it. Josh Allen deserves it. He put in the work. And that was my biggest takeaway of Week 17 of the NFL. I think there's only 2 teams that will win the Super Bowl. I think one of Buffalo or Kansas City's winning it. Obviously, they can't play each other because of AFC, NFC. And again, there's been a lot of good teams in the NFL this year. I mean, the Dolphins missed at 10-6. 3 11-5 playoff teams in the AFC. Not trying to take away from anything that what the Titans did or the Colts did or the Steelers or even the Browns, anything like that. But in my opinion, I just feel when I'm watching this, when I'm watching film, when I'm watching even live, when I'm reading articles, when I'm looking at analytics, that it just appears to me that Buffalo and Kansas City are on a different level than everybody else right now, and that's including the entirety of the NFC. And I know how good Green Bay's been this year, and I know how consistent the Saints are, but I just feel like when I'm watching it that Buffalo and Kansas City are just on a different level from everybody else. So again, that was my biggest takeaway from Week 17 in the NFL. We're going to take a short break here. On the other side of this break, we'll get right into it. I do want to talk about the Philadelphia Eagle game. What does it mean for Jalen Hurts? What should they do with Doug Peterson? And sort of the state of the union in Philadelphia overall. What should they do with Carson Wentz? What's the number one landing spot? Where do I think makes the most sense? We'll do a state of the union on the city of Philadelphia, and I think we're also going to talk about eventually what the Miami Dolphins should do going forward with Tua Tagovailoa. They have the 3rd overall pick due to that Laramie Tunsil Houston Texan trade. Somehow Houston was so bad that they got the 3rd overall pick. So Miami, a playoff team, probably one of the better teams to miss the playoffs the last 20 years, has a top 3 pick in the NFL draft. People are talking about Zach Wilson. People are talking about Penny Sewell. People are talking about Devonta Smith, who might win the Heisman tonight. I'll give you my 2 cents on the Miami Dolphins as well. So we'll do a State of the Union on the Philadelphia Eagles and the Miami Dolphins for the rest of the next segment, hopefully, maybe over the next 2 segments. We'll get into all that good stuff right after this short break.
Are you looking for the very best NFL and college football podcast? Then check out the GSMC Football Podcast. Get the latest football news both on and off the field. From the NFL Draft to trades to the rumor mill to the NFL Combines. They got you covered. That's GSMCpodcast.com/football-podcast. Get updates on college rivalries, game day insights, and much, much more. It's football talk the way you want it. This show eats, sleeps, and breathes football. Don't forget to like them on Facebook and follow them on Twitter. Visit GSMCpodcast.com for more info.
All right, and we are back here at the GSMC Sports Podcast, brought to you by the GSMC Podcast Network. Again, I am your host, Alex Masford. Thank you so much for tuning into today's episode and to be continuing to listen to the show. If you're a returning listener, we really do appreciate you. I just finished talking everything sort of Buffalo Bill, Kansas City Chiefs vibes, kind of. I think just looking from the top to bottom, there's a lot of good teams in the NFL this year. Again, we've had teams who are missing the playoffs at 10-6, 3 11-5 playoff teams in the AFC. Overall, incredible year this year for just a lot of winning teams. Again, at the bottom of the NFL isn't as big as it usually is. We don't have as many, teams looking for quarterbacks as maybe as we usually do, or at least as many bad teams looking for quarterbacks as we usually do. And but when I watch Kansas City and when I watch Buffalo, when Buffalo hangs 56 on the Miami Dolphins, number one scoring defense. Brian Flores, one of the best defensive coaches in the entire league. Xavier Howard, who might win Defensive Player of the Year. When even some of their backups light you up, right? That's just how Buffalo is just on a different level, in my opinion, at least offensively. They're on a different level than a lot of other teams. The only team that they're not on a different level on, in my opinion, is Kansas City, who might even be on a different level than Buffalo. I don't know. But I do think that those two teams have separated themselves at least a little bit. If you want to throw Green Bay in there from an offensive standpoint, maybe. From a defensive standpoint, I don't think so. I still think they're a tier below with the Saints, with maybe even the Rams on a good day, and the Seahawks on their best day, and maybe even Tampa on their best day, and you throw in maybe Tennessee and Baltimore and maybe Pittsburgh if their offense decides to show up. But in my opinion, Buffalo and Kansas City, one of those two teams will be winning the Super Bowl this year. If I had to pick one, I'd pick Kansas City, obviously. But Buffalo's growing on me by really the hour. Buffalo's growing on me. The more I look into their analytics, the more I watch tape on Josh Allen. They look absolutely incredible this year, and they've really flipped the script, specifically Josh Allen, the whole narrative with his accuracy and everything like that. I want to do a State of the Union on the Philadelphia Eagles real quick. I'll do it for the Miami Dolphins a little bit later as well. Those seem to be the two teams a lot of people had a lot of questions about. A lot of people had questions about, Tua Tagovailoa, the Miami Dolphins. What's the future going to look like there? What are they going to do with the third overall pick? And I thought I was going to maybe lead the show or do this segment about that entirely. But then what happened in Philadelphia happened. So if you didn't know, the divisions came down to Sunday Night Football. The Giants had won their game, and if the Washington football team had lost to the Philadelphia Eagles, the New York Giants would have won the NFC East and made the playoffs. Obviously, the Giants and the Cowboys had sort of a slugfest game where the Giants came out on top, and all of the Giants fans and really the NFL world was watching Sunday night to see who was going to win the NFC East. Now, the Eagles had nothing to gain from a record standpoint, from a playoff standpoint. They had already been mathematically eliminated. So that game didn't mean a whole lot to Philadelphia. Maybe you want to end the good year on a high note, or you want to knock a division rival out of their playoff race in the Washington football team. The game was close from start to finish, you could argue. Wasn't a great game, pretty boring, but the game died when Jalen Hurts got yanked, right? He wasn't benched for play. There's speculation, right? Everyone immediately went to the Philadelphia Eagles tanked that game. Now, if this game was played at 1 o'clock, if this game was even played at 4 o'clock, I don't think we're talking about this. I think it's a non-story. But it being the last Sunday Night Football game of the regular season, with us already knowing the result of the Giants game. We all knew what had to happen, and it seemed painfully obvious that when Doug Peterson yanked Jalen Hurts, he was throwing the game for better draft position. Now, there's no way of completely proving that. I doubt there's some audio recording that the NFL is going to release or anything of Doug Peterson telling his coaches, Jalen's doing too good, we got to get him out of the game, or anything like that. But I don't think that Doug Peterson handled it the right way. Now, here's the thing. If that was your game plan, if they did say also, by the way, that Nate Sudfeld was going to get some sort of, playing time in the game. We all kind of expected this, but maybe after Jalen Hurts ran for 2 touchdowns, looked pretty good in the game, you would have liked to seen, if you're a Philadelphia fan, you would have liked to seen Jalen Hurts end his rookie campaign, a weird one at that, giving you a positive sort of like, wow, look at this. I beat at home in Philly, a division rival, to knock them out of the playoffs. That's a good start to your offseason. Get him some more weapons, build around him, figure out the Carson Wentz situation. But instead you have all these questions. You have Philly players who are pissed off. Miles Sanders coming out and say that him along with many other players were not happy that Jalen Hurts was pulled from the game. And I think Doug Peterson could have quieted all this by saying one thing in his press conference. Not the way he handled it by saying, we promised Nate some snaps, and he said all this crap like, Nate's been with us for a couple years, he deserves some snaps, he works hard. No, he doesn't. He's the third-string quarterback for a reason. If you're the third-string quarterback, you don't deserve snaps. They pray to God you never have to enter the game if it means anything. What he could have said was, we were worried about Jalen Hurts' health. This game had nothing to prove record-wise. This game had nothing to do with playoff implications. Doug Peterson could have said, Jalen Hurts is our future quarterback. We were worried about his health. There is a scary defensive line, filled with Chase Young and Montrez Sweat and some other guys. That Washington defense is the reason why they're in the playoffs, and they are a scary defense. I wouldn't want to play them in the playoffs. At least their defense, I wouldn't want to play them in the playoffs. But at the end of the day, you could have said, Jalen Hurts, mobile guy, Chase Young, Montrez Sweat. We didn't want to risk an injury to him. We want him to be our quarterback going forward. But don't give me this crap that Nate Sudfeld deserved snaps because he's worked hard over the last 3 years. I mean, it just leaves you with more questions than answers. And obviously, his playoffs, his players, Miles Sanders included, I'm sure some of these other guys, Fletcher Cox, some of these other dudes, were not happy in the fact that, Hurts was pulled. I'm sure if you were a veteran on that team, there were some scenes after the game of, I think it was Jason Kelce, Zach Ertz, and Carson Wentz sort of sitting down on the field after the game reminiscing. It's expected that maybe all 3 of those guys won't be back with Philadelphia next year, sort of an end of an era. That Super Bowl team feels like it's dead now. It feels like the core of that team is gone. It feels like the spirit of that team is gone. And Philadelphia just doesn't seem like a winning organization anymore. There was a time after that Super Bowl with how good that defense was, how good Carson Wentz looked, that we looked going forward as, wow, this Philadelphia team could be in, Super Bowl contention for a while now. They've already, once they get Carson Wentz locked up and some of these guys look pretty good and looking towards the future, Philadelphia's always going to be a threat in the NFC. And it just feels like ever since Frank Wright left, things never got better for Carson, for Doug, for anybody really on that team, that entire organization. And now it seems like Philadelphia's back to square one. Rookie quarterback who you don't obviously, he's shown some moments, he's shown some flashes, but you don't know for certain if he's the future. He didn't do what Justin Herbert did and break every single rookie passing yard record. You don't have a sure confirmation that he is your guy going forward. He could stink it up next year, and you look at a guy in 2022 immediately. He only had a limited amount of starts. So now there's more questions than answers, right? Are the players happy with Doug Peterson? Are the fans happy with Doug Peterson? Is ownership happy with Doug Peterson? He's kept his job, but now people seem to be on edge and a little bit pissed off. Is Jalen Hurts the future? Where was that signature win we were looking for? He could have had one in that last game. Who's the wide receiver position? Jalen Reagor looks good, not great. You see guys like Justin Jefferson who might win Rookie of the Year, and you have to wonder why didn't Doug Peterson and the GM for the Philadelphia Eagles go after him? Go after a guy like that. Who's going to play tight end? Right? Zach Ertz is gone. Has Dallas got it ready to make the leap and be tight end number 1 for that Philadelphia team? Can Miles Sanders handle a big workload? All of these questions now are unanswered going into an offseason. And sure, Doug, you have that 6th overall pick, but it would have been nice for your fans. Would have been nice to your to the NFL world, right? To Jalen Hurts. Let him have that moment. Let him beat Washington. Let him knock them out of the playoffs. Let him prove that, look at this, I am your future going forward, right? And it looks like, Doug Peterson, the coach, who just butchered, that coaching relationship with Carson Wentz that is apparently reportedly broken beyond repair. And now you have Jalen Hurts and some of these other guys in the locker room, Miles Sanders included, already not happy with you. Not the right way to start off a new era of Philadelphia football. Would I fire Doug Peterson? No, but would he be on a short leash after next season if he doesn't produce some sort of brighter future going after, for the next year? I definitely consider it. So that's my State of the Union on the Philadelphia Eagles. To cap it all off, I do want to say what I would do for Carson Wentz. It's relatively obvious. A lot of people have talked about it. There's only one team that makes sense, and that's the Indianapolis Colts. Phillip Rivers has all but said he's going to retire after this season. He's playing on some sort of broken bone in his foot. They made the playoffs barely thanks to the Miami Dolphins losing to the Buffalo Bills and them obviously beating the Jacksonville Jaguars. So he's going to make a nice little playoff run. I think they get smoked by Buffalo in the first round this coming Saturday, and I think Phillip Rivers retires. Now, I think Indianapolis is going to look at a guy like Sam Darnold. I think they're even going to look at a guys like the draft like Trey Lance, Mac Jones, Newman out of Georgia / he kind of opted out this year. Riddler from University of Cincinnati. There's a lot of guys they could look at, but at the end of the day, Frank Reich knows what he can do with Carson Wentz to put him in the best position to succeed. Better offensive line, better defense. Honestly, less pressure from the fan base. Indianapolis' fan base is far less going than Philadelphia is. Less pressure from the media. And I love Philadelphia. I love their fans. I love their media. I love the pressure. I love these cities like Boston, New York, LA, Philadelphia that bring the pressure to their athletes because the stars that come out of those cities are even better than the guys who come out of Indianapolis and things like that. No shade towards anybody. But for Carson Wentz, who seems to not be able to handle that pressure of Philadelphia anymore, the high expectations of that great fan base in Philly and the awesome media in Philadelphia, Indianapolis would be good for him. A change of scenery, quiet Midwestern area. Obviously went to North Dakota State in college. And again, reuniting with Frank Reich, who had him at his best. Played, coached him at his best. Put him in the best position to succeed. Again, Jonathan Taylor looks like the best rookie running back since God knows who. Already a playoff team. Established culture. Established defense. Maybe the best O-line in the entire league. Up-and-coming run game, up-and-coming young running back. It'd just be great for Carson Wentz. Easier division, you could argue. Not actually. NFC East is a worse division, but it's a harder division in the AFC South, but still, it's not the toughest, if you know what I'm saying here. Jacksonville, Houston, not a clear-cut direction of how they get good quickly. Maybe Jacksonville with Lawrence. Maybe if Houston gets a receiver or two. Tennessee's obviously a great team, but Indianapolis and Tennessee are kind of neck and neck in my opinion. They're not too far off of each other. So I'd trade into Indianapolis. You might have to attach a fourth-round pick to get off the salary. I'd restart, hit the reset button, clear some cap space, draft another wide receiver, whether it be Jamar Chase or Devonta Smith if you can get him if he falls that far. If either of those guys make it to 6, that's what I would do if I was Philadelphia. Move off of Ertz, obviously, if you don't want to pay him. And come in with a new offseason and get Jalen Hurts, Jamar Chase, Miles Sanders, Dallas Goedert. That young core of an offense. Start there, Doug, and rebuild from there, retool, and get better sooner rather than later. And who knows, maybe you can compete with a division like that. We just saw, a 7-9 Washington team win that division? Who's going to say that 9-7? Maybe I think it'll get a little bit better because of how good Dallas might be next year with getting Dak back. And obviously some of these teams like Washington's going to get a new quarterback. That defense is only going to improve. So I'm not saying the division's going to be a cakewalk and you can get in at 7-9 again. But 9-7 might win that division next year. And if you have a good young offensive core with Jalen Hurts, Miles Sanders, maybe a guy like Jamar Chase, Dallas Goedert at the tight end position, you add a couple of eyes via free agency after you get Carson Wentz off the books and get Zach Ertz off the book, maybe get Jason Kelce off the books, and then you can start having a field day on the offensive side of the ball. I just don't know if I trust Doug Peterson to do that anymore. It does feel like a little bit he's lost that locker room. All right, we're going to take another short break. That was my State of the Union on the Philadelphia Eagles. That was probably maybe even the biggest story coming out of Week 17. Wasn't my biggest takeaway. That was obviously the Buffalo and Kansas City bit. But definitely, that was a big, important game. And if I was Doug Peterson, I would have left him in there. And if people questioned me about it after the game, I would have said I was concerned for his health. I wouldn't have said that Nate Sudfeld deserves some snaps. It just seems like you're BSing the media, BSing the fan base, BSing the entire NFL in general. All right, that's going to do it for this segment. On the other side of this short break, I want to give a State of the Union on the Miami Dolphins. They are probably one of the better teams to miss the playoffs in my lifetime. 10-6 Miami Dolphins did not make the playoffs. They had the 3rd overall pick. A lot of people want to know, what should they do with Tua Tagovailoa? Get him some weapons and build around him, or move off of him and maybe go after a guy like Justin Fields or Zach Wilson? Talk everything Miami Dolphins right after this short break.
Check out the show that's built on the MMA, from the UFC to extreme cage fighting. They got the fights covered. Check out the GSMC MMA podcast. Get the latest news on past or upcoming fights. Join us as we talk to and about some of the biggest names in the MMA, past, present, and future. When it's the fight game, there's just one show to check out. GSMCpodcast.com/MMA-podcast. Don't forget to like them on Facebook and follow them on Twitter. Visit GSMCpodcast.com for more info.
All right, and we are back here at the GSMC Sports Podcast, brought to you by the GSMC Podcast Network. Again, I am your host, Alex Masfred. Thank you so much for tuning into today's episode and again, to be continuing to listen to the show. If you are a returning listener, we really do appreciate you. I just finished talking everything Philadelphia Eagles, sort of gave a State of the Union on them. A lot of people had a lot of questions for Doug Peterson, Jalen Hurts, just given the whole situation of the pulling/benching of Jalen Hurts, and also just the situation with Carson Wentz. The fan base in Philadelphia is not happy with the Eagles organization right now. The media is not happy. Carson Wentz isn't happy. Some of these guys, Carson Wentz, Chase and Kelsey, Ertz, are fan favorites in that city, and it appears that at least two of them in Wentz and Ertz are probably gone next year. Who knows about Jason Kelsey? So it's just sad to see, really, that this era of Philadelphia, remember them with the dog masks, winning that Super Bowl, that parade, everything like that. That whole era of Philadelphia football only just lasted that 1 year, it feels like. And it's sad, but that's just how, I guess, it goes in the NFL. Again, it stands for the Not For Long League, and that's how people really view it. And I guess there's no truer testament to that phrase, Not For Long League, or just not for long, whatever you want to call it in the NFL, than the Philadelphia Eagles, sort of this era of Eagle football. Now, I want to do something similar for the Miami Dolphins. So they are that one team that missed out. We knew in the AFC a team was going to miss out on the playoffs. It was, the Browns, the Ravens, the Colts, and the Dolphins. 4 teams fighting for 3 spots. Whichever team lost their game was going to miss the playoffs unless, they all won and then Indianapolis would have missed it. Everybody took care of business except for the Miami Dolphins. Now, in my opinion, the Miami Dolphins are the youngest of all those teams. They were also probably the biggest surprise out of those 4 teams. I think we all knew that Baltimore was good. I think we all knew Cleveland was better, that they were going to compete for a playoff spot and probably make it. We all thought that. I thought they'd be the 7th seed. And we thought Indianapolis with Phillip Rivers was a clear upgrade over Jacoby Brissett. And that roster is really, really good. So if Phillip just did, enough positives, that team would be good. I don't think any of us expected, Cleveland and maybe Indianapolis to be 11-5. But I also didn't expect the Miami Dolphins to go 10-6. I thought they would go 8-8. I still thought they were a year away. Tua Tagovailoa looked interesting this year, to say the least. Now, was I expecting him to come in and light the world on fire like maybe Justin Herbert is doing? That surprised me. I didn't think he would light the world on fire either. I don't expect that from any rookie. But it was interesting to see Tua. So Tua Tagovailoa, in my opinion, was maybe, you've heard this before, probably from like Trent Dilfer or something, the best vertical passing quarterback of college football history. With all those weapons, 4 first-round picks eventually once Waddle and Devonta Smith go. Obviously, Ruggs and Judy in last year's class. Devonta might even win the Heisman tonight. I think it's down to him or Trevor Lawrence, in my opinion. When you're watching this, it should be tonight, I believe, is the ceremony, and my money's on Devonta Smith winning it, but it wouldn't surprise me if they gave it to Lawrence, given how good he is as well. Both of those guys deserve it. So again, they would just kind of run straight create a lot of separation, and Tua would be dropping dimes. He gets to the Miami Dolphins. Their weapons are not good to begin with. Then mentioned Devontae Parker battling a lot of injuries. Preston Williams missing essentially the entire second half of the season. A rotating running back room between Myles Gaskin, Jordan Howard at the beginning of the year, Salvon Ahmed, and of course Matt Breida, who was sort of unused. Mike Gesicki goes down with a shoulder injury towards the later part of the year, and he isn't really as effective as he usually is. The pressure of Ryan Fitzpatrick maybe to come in, the benching twice. And Tua Tagovailoa struggled this year. Was he bad? No. Was he great? No. What would I say he did this year? I would give him a B. Given the talent, given everything, I think he did good with this roster. I think he did good given the play calling and a very conservative play calling. But you have to remember something with Tua Tagovailoa as well, which is I don't think is a lot of people are talking about. Tua Tagovailoa could not perfect his craft this offseason. He could not become a better quarterback this offseason like Herbert could, and Hurts could, and Burrow could. They could work with NFL coaches, go to the combine, work out privately one-on-one, hire Jordan Palmer like Joe Burrow did, and their private quarterback coaches, and working on different arm angles and getting stronger, getting faster. Tua spent the entire offseason trying to figure out if he was ever going to walk/play again after the traumatic hip injury that he suffered, and he barely got a pro day off. So I give him a pass for this season entirely. A lot of people, including me, argued that you could potentially sit him in the entire year. I thought he should have sat half the year, which is about what he did. He played more than half. He played 10 games. In those 10 games, the Miami Dolphins won 7 of them, and he started them. He didn't necessarily win all of them. He didn't win that Oakland game. Ryan Fitzpatrick did, but as a starting quarterback in the NFL, they were 3-3 with Ryan Fitzpatrick, and they were, what does that mean? 7-3 with Tua Tagovailoa. And that means something in the NFL. And I understand I don't consider wins to be a QB stat by any stretch of the imagination. But at the end of the day, Tua Tagovailoa with guys like Lynn Bowden, Mac Hollins, who else did they have? Mike Gesicki for a certain part of it. He was also hurt a lot. Dermot Smythe. A lot of these guys were not elite weapons. When you go look at some of these other quarterbacks, I'm not saying that, obviously the Chargers and the Bengals have worse overall rosters than the Miami Dolphins do, have a worse overall coach than the Miami Dolphins do, worse overall organization. The Dolphins are a better franchise at this current stage than both the Bengals and the Chargers. But the offensive weapons for Joe Burrow, you see Joe Mixon, you see T. Higgins, you see Tyler Boyd, A.J. Green. T. Higgins, you could argue, would be the best receiver on the Miami Dolphins right now. I know Keenan Allen would be. I know Hunter Henry, Austin Eckler, Mike Williams, these talent that all of these guys had. And it led to Tua looking a lot like a guy like Alex Smith, a game manager who just didn't want to turn the ball over and keep his team in position to win games. Now, he showed moments. He showed glimpses. That Arizona game, he showed the ability to be a special quarterback in this league, I thought. Even in moments of the Kansas City Chiefs game when he was trying to lead a comeback, he showed moments of being an elite quarterback in this league. And then he showed some moments of a rookie, right? That Denver game, holding on to the ball too long, risking his own health, hurting the team, and of course that Raider game as well. Now, when it comes to specifically the Buffalo game, the stats are not accurate, right? He threw for a ton of yards. That doesn't mean Tua usually throws for a ton of yards, right? So even with the good things like the yardages, we should take with a grain of salt, and those 3 interceptions we should take with a grain of salt. The first interception was a quick slant to Devontae Parker when the game was still in reach. Devontae Parker slipped. Josh Norman had an easy interception, walk-in pick 6, not Tua's fault. The second interception was a ball that was a little bit high. Lynn Bowden got his hands on it, but sort of tipped it up, intercepted by the safety, not necessarily Tua's fault either. Could have been a better ball, sure, but a lot of guys in their NFL make that catch. Lynn Bowden, converted wide receiver, probably doesn't. That third interception was him forcing a ball, trying to make a play, completely overthrew Mike Gesicki, and it was a pick. That last interception, in my opinion, was a poor throw and poor decision by Tua. But if you want to look at it, in my opinion, he really only threw 1 interception. That was his fault in that game, which would put him at 3 interceptions on the year, 14 total touchdowns, 3 earned interceptions, in my opinion, 3 rushing touchdowns as well, I think he had 11 passing touchdowns. And if you could have told me, and a lot of other people, that Tua Tagovailoa would have, 14 total touchdowns, 3 earned interceptions, so 3 really bad decisions, 3 throws that you were like, oh, that's on you, that's a poor decision, that's a turnover on the quarterback, the Miami Dolphins would go 10-6. Would every Dolphin fan, would every NFL media person tell you that is a successful rookie season? And they would tell you that Tua Tagovailoa should be considered for Rookie of the Year. But it's all about expectations. They missed the playoffs. They have a stinker to end the year. On top of all that, Justin Herbert sets the world on fire, and Joe Burrow sets the world on fire at least a little bit before everything that went on with his knee and everything like that, and expectations are raised. But when was the expectation ever for Tua Tagovailoa coming off a major disastrous hip injury to do the things that he did this year? I thought he exceeded expectations a little bit. He showed the accuracy. He showed mobility enough. Now give him this offseason a chance to actually not have to rehab, to get bigger, to get stronger. Sit down with Chan Gailey, the coaching staff, and try to figure out a game plan where he can throw the ball downfield more. And most importantly for the Miami Dolphins, get him weapons. They hold the 3rd overall pick in the draft, and in case you haven't noticed already, I don't think they should move off of Tua Tagovailoa. I went on that whole rant about Josh Allen. Josh Allen threw 10 touchdowns his rookie year and 12 interceptions. Tua Tagovailoa threw 14 touchdowns, and if you want to count the extra 2, he threw 5 interceptions in total. So he had a better year than Josh Allen, and now you're telling me you're not going to give him the real chance to develop going forward, that you're going to abandon him after 1 year for a guy like Justin Fields or Zach Wilson's unproven commodities. You have to stack them up against each other, I guess, if you want to scout and if you want to look at it. And sure, you can make the argument you should consider it. You have the 3rd overall pick, assuming we know how good Brian Flores is. We know how good this defense is. The Dolphins are going to have a top 3 pick for a long, long time. It wasn't even their pick to begin with. It's Houston's. But in my opinion, there's a guy there, Devonta Smith, who played 3 years with Tua Tagovailoa, caught that incredible pass both of their freshman years to win the national championship at Georgia. He's my pick to win the Heisman tonight, and especially if he wins the Heisman Trophy, if he is named the best player in college football and is the first wide receiver to win it since 1991, I believe it was Desmond Howard, sitting at 3 or trading back or whoever you want to do, get Tua Tagovailoa, one of his best friends, on and off the field. Devonta Smith, a guy who creates real separation, makes a real playmaking difference, is a special type of wide receiver talent. Reminds me a ton of Marvin Harrison. Reminds me a lot of Stephon Diggs as well. Those are my 2 pro comparisons for him. His speed, his agility. The biggest issue that the Dolphins wide receivers had this year was creating separation. And their best receiver is Devontae Parker, and he's not a creative separation type of receiver. He's a jump ball guy. So he can stay in that role perfectly fine. But if you add a guy like Devonta Smith and maybe sign a guy like Curtis Samuel, let Tua run it up with some speed, run some 4 verts, do things like that, play to his strengths. Tua Tagovailoa this year with a clean pocket, had 11 touchdowns, no interceptions according to Pro Football Focus. So get that offensive line, then had 3 rookies starting this year. They'll have an offseason to get better, mesh more, only get better with age. Tua Tagovailoa, instead of rehabbing this whole offseason, can get in the weight room, add some more weight, get his arm a little bit bigger, throw with a little bit more velocity, not have to focus on his hip the whole damn time. Another year in the system as well, same playbook. Get him some weapons, maybe Devonta Smith. Then they have the 18th overall pick. Maybe they go for a Najee Harris or a Travis Etienne, and all of a sudden you could have Tua Tagovailoa throwing to his best friends, Najee Harris and Devonta Smith, who might win the Heisman Trophy tonight. Those are the type of things that make Josh Allen look like the least accurate quarterback in the NFL to maybe the best quarterback in the NFL this season, right? You get him Stephon Diggs, you got him a better offensive line, and look how it takes off. Look how much Josh Allen took off with an offseason of work and Stephon Diggs. Now get that for Tua Tagovailoa. Watch him take off. Watch him make the leap next year. I really do believe that for the Miami Dolphins. I think they have their coach in Brian Flores. In my opinion, he should still win Coach of the Year. The team was 5-11 last year, had the worst point differential in the entire league, followed up next year with, in my opinion, the best defense in the NFL besides maybe Pittsburgh and Miami. On top of that, top 5 point differential in the league. And again, in a normal year, most likely makes the playoffs if the AFC wasn't so stacked, with 2 different quarterbacks making incredible calls, benching Tua, putting in Fitzmagic, all of the craziness with COVID as well. Tua Tagovailoa, I think, is the Dolphins quarterback going forward. I really do believe that. And I think Brian Flores is a rock star head coach in the making if he isn't there already. And I think the Dolphins might have. If you ranked brightest futures in the NFL right now, number 1, I'd tell you Buffalo. Or not Buffalo, Kansas City, obviously, because of Patrick Mahomes. Number 2, I'd probably tell you Buffalo, but again, it's going to be interesting to see how Buffalo and Josh Allen do next year after losing Brian Dable, who will definitely take a head coaching job, in my opinion. And if Miami's not 2, they're definitely 3 when it comes to the brightest future in all of the NFL. As long as Tua Tagovailoa pans out, you need to get a proper evaluation with him when he has all those weapons. If you give Tua all those weapons, if you sign an Allen Robinson, a Kenny Golladay, a Chris Godwin, and then draft Devontae Smith and Najee Harris, and he can't do it next year, then you look at a Sam Howell, or you look at a Spencer Rattler, or somebody who's going to be coming in the 2022 NFL draft class, or look for a veteran. But you can't evaluate Tua Tagovailoa off of 10 starts and a COVID year with no preseason, coming off a traumatic injury, which he didn't even know if he would be walking again a little over 13 months ago, and with Lynn Bowden and Mac Hollins, no disrespect, but those guys as your number one weapons, and he still had a winning record and an incredible touchdown to interception ratio. So maybe his yards per attempt isn't what everybody wants it to be, but at the end of the day, Tua Tagovailoa was winning football games, and he was the starting quarterback of a near playoff team and probably a top 13 team in the NFL this year, as a rookie coming off a traumatic hip injury that's usually only suffered in freaking car accidents. So give the kid a break. Let him have a full offseason of of just getting better and things like that. And then moving forward, get him some weapons. Maybe bolster the offensive line if you have to. But I think, going to develop, things like that. But, at the end of the day, you can't, this era of just rushing guys out before they've had a chance to develop, I don't think it's healthy. I don't think it's the right way to go about it. We're seeing what Josh Allen's doing. We're seeing what Lamar Jackson is doing with a little bit more development. Patrick Mahomes sat for a year. We have to give some of these young guys with immense pressure already on them to carry the weight of their entire franchises at least a couple of years to grow. At least 2, man. You can't move off of these guys 1, and I understand it worked for the Cardinals, right? But we didn't know in the moment if Josh Rosen was going to be this bad or this much of a bust. A lot of people disagree with the decision, and just because it worked for Arizona, they didn't make the playoffs this year, if you remember. I'm not faulting Kyler Murray, but I think he's a great, incredible talent, incredible quarterback. But that team didn't make the playoffs this year, right? So it's not like a quick turnaround or anything like that. The quarterback is a lot, but isn't everything. I think you need to develop a guy like Tua Tagovailoa, get him some weapons. His best friends, Najee Harris, Devontae Smith would do. I think they have a great tight end, Mike Gesicki, best overall weapon. Great coach, Brian Flores. Future's very, very bright in Miami, and they have their quarterback and they have their coach, in my opinion. So all the Justin Fields or Zach Wilson to Miami talk, I think, is a little excessive and a little crazy, just in my opinion. All right, that's going to do it for this segment. That was a State of the Union on the Miami Dolphins. Right after this final short break, I'll be giving you my top 10 teams in the NBA this year. Had a really tough time making this list. The NBA season is off to a weird start. Do I include the Magic, Knicks, and Cleveland Cavaliers in there? You'll find out in a few short moments. Or am I not buying into the hype? I'll be giving you my top 10 NBA teams for the final segment of today's absolutely packed show, coming up right after this final short break.
Are you looking for help for your fantasy football team? Check out the GSMC Fantasy Football Podcast. Get today's best advice on who to start, who to sit, even who you should draft. From sleeper picks to red-hot lineups, they got it all covered for you. That's gsmcpodcast.com/fantasy-football-podcast. We'll cover traditional leagues, dynasty, PPR, even IDP leagues. When you need fantasy help, there's just one show to hit up. Don't forget to like them on Facebook and follow them on Twitter. Visit gsmcpodcast.com for more info.
All right, and we are back here at the GSMC Sports Podcast, brought to you by the GSMC Podcast Network for the final segment of today's absolutely packed show, and that's going to be giving you my top 10 NBA teams. So far this season, the NBA season has been absolutely weird. Like I keep mentioning, some of these teams like the Magic are 5-2, and the Knicks are 4-3, and the Cavs are 4-3, with Sexton averaging, I think, 26 points per game. And of course, we see teams like the Pelicans being the 5th seed in the Western Conference right now, and the Kings being the 9th seed. So it's very, very early in the NBA season, but I want to do this at least once a week, giving you my top 10 teams, sort of a order of how I think the NBA season is going so far. So let's get right into it. So as of right now, we're about 2 weeks in-ish of the NBA season. I know a lot of teams have played some more games than others, so it's not necessarily fair just yet. But these are my top 10 teams in the NBA right now. after doing some research, watching some tape, everything like that. Number 10, I'm going to give it to the Utah Jazz. They've had a great start to the season this year. They are 4-2, again, super early, but still Donovan Mitchell, hot start. I think this team, after they got Bogdanovich back, might be better than people think. I don't remember where I put them exactly in my predictions, but I definitely had them making the playoffs. I'm a huge fan of Donovan Mitchell. He's a lot of fun to watch. One of my favorite players in the entire NBA, in my opinion, is him. And at the end of the day, I really do believe that they're going to make a lot of noise this year. I don't know if they're going to make it to a Western Conference Finals, but I don't know if they'll get bounced in the first round this year like they usually do. They've had a good start this year. So yeah, number 10, I have the Utah Jazz, led by Donovan Mitchell, Rudy Gobert, who got that big extension, everything like that. So they're coming in at number 10. At number 9, I have the Indiana Pacers. Another great start to the year. Question their head coaching hire, question their new system. How would Oladipo look? Oladipo looks back. He looks healthy. Sabonis is playing like an incredible player right now, like one of the best centers in the league. Malcolm Brogdon continues to evolve and keep proving people that he's better in Indiana than he was in Milwaukee and wasn't utilized properly there, I guess. 5-2 to start the year, 3rd seed in the Eastern Conference. Again, super early, but just the fact that I'm seeing that Oladipo looks back and healthy, averaging, I believe, 23 to 25 points a game now. Sabonis being the best player on that team, also averaging, I think, double figure or 20 plus points a game on good shooting and everything like that. And of course, Malcolm Brogdon sort of getting everybody in position in that offense and also being a star himself. The Pacers are a really good, complete team. Will they fade out? I'm not sure. Again, only 7 games in. They're 5-2. But it's really fun to watch this Indiana Pacer team, and boy, have they been good so far. And it's really good to see Victor Oladipo back. Coming in at number 8 is the Milwaukee Bucks, man. They're not living up to the hype so far. Drew Holiday's had some nice moments, so has Giannis, but 4-3 to start the season. Little bit sluggish. There wasn't any injuries for some of the excuses of the early losses or anything, so it's kind of confusing to understand why they've started so slow. They're still my favorite to be the number 1 seed in the Eastern Conference, and they probably might have the best record in the entire NBA when it's all said and done like they did last year, but slow start for them. Not looking as good as a lot of people had hoped, at least in, Milwaukee, I would say. But they're still a top 10 team in the league. I haven't given up faith on them just yet. They're 4-3, 7th in the Eastern Conference, and I have them coming in at number 8. Coming in at number 7, I have the Philadelphia 76ers. Now, they're off to a hot start, 6-1. This is more of my lack of trust in Philadelphia. Ben Simmons and Joel Embiid look great this year. Doc Rivers seems to have a really good system. That Seth Curry addition, looks absolutely incredible. Their three-point shooting has clearly improved. And things like that are going to help Ben Simmons and Joel Embiid thrive. But yeah, definitely Seth Curry is the underrated, unsung hero for that team so far. They're number 1 in the Eastern Conference, 6-1. I don't expect it to last. I think eventually they'll sort of come back down to earth. Again, it's my lack of trust in the 76ers, which is why I have them coming in at number 7, but still a very good team in this league and definitely better than they were last year. So coming in at number 7, I have the Philadelphia 76ers. Coming in at number 6, I have the Boston Celtics, who are off to a hot start, 5-3. Jason Tatum, it looks like, has taken another leap, so is Jaylen Brown. The only reason why I'm not all in on them yet is I feel like it's just those two guys. Peyton Pritchard has had some nice moments, the rookie out of Oregon, but Tristan Thompson, Jeff Teague coming a little bit injury right now because I'm concerned with him. Haven't seen a lot from their bench either. That Naismith draft pick hasn't really done anything for me just yet. Still think they're an incredible team though. Definitely number 6. Could definitely get to an Eastern Conference Finals or something like that. But I have them coming in at number 6. I just want to see the rest of their team sort of do a little bit more. So coming in at number 6, I have the Boston Celtics. Coming in at number 5 is a surprise team that I told you would be good this year, the Phoenix Suns. Chris Paul, that addition was absolutely incredible for a guy like DeAndre Ayton. Obviously, we know how good Devin Booker is. I told you they would be a top 4 seed in the Western Conference at the end of the year. They're number 2 right now. I don't expect them to stay that way. I think they'll drop off at least a little bit. But at the end of the day, man, this team is not to be reckoned with. In my opinion, they could end up being the 3rd best team in the Western Conference. I wouldn't be surprised at all. I told you they'd be top 4. Wouldn't surprise me if they got away up to 3, maybe even 2. Absolutely incredible stuff. CP3 is obviously a baller in the clutch. We already know that. Devin Booker's the face of that franchise and the best player on that team. They figured something out in the bubble. Monty Williams, something. They figured out how to play basketball as a complete coherent unit. And then adding a veteran like Chris Paul, who doesn't lose very often, it's just going to help your team and your culture overall. So coming in at number 5, I have the Phoenix Suns. They've been a top 5 team in the year this year. Again, maybe I didn't buy into the hype of the Magic or even the 76ers, the Knicks, or the Cavaliers. I am buying into the hype of the Phoenix Suns. I think they're a really good team this year. Coming in at 4 is the Miami Heat. Now, I understand understand that they're off to a rough start necessarily. You're telling me, oh, they're below the Bucs. They've also haven't played as many games as everybody. They've only played 6 games, coming in at 3-3. Jimmy Butler has also missed 2.5 of those games, given their slow start. But when everybody is healthy, they have blown out on Christmas Day. They absolutely blew out the New Orleans Pelicans and just recently blew out the Oklahoma City Thunder. It's going to be interesting this week. They play the Celtics twice. I want to see how those two teams match up. And boy, do I really believe Bam Adebayo is the future of basketball, everybody. This man is shooting above 67% from the field on 10-plus field goal attempts a game. He's essentially averaging 28 and 5, which is absolutely ridiculous. Bam looks like he's taking another leap offensively. His mid-range game, he shot 20% last year. He's shooting above 50% from the mid-range game this year. He seriously looks like Kevin Garnett with a little bit more handles and a little bit more athleticism. That's just how he's looking this year, and that's absolutely ridiculous to see. Wouldn't surprise me if at the end of the year we're talking about Bam Adebayo being the best player on that team and not Jimmy Butler. Tyler Hero had a slow start with the first 2 games, has picked it up since then, had a couple of big 20-plus point games for them, and overall the Miami Heat look fantastic in the games they're good and have some questions in the games they're bad. But at the end of the day, I'm going to give them the excuse with the Jimmy Butler injuries to the slow start. They're coming in at 3-3, but man, Bam looks absolutely incredible this year, and it's my faith in the Miami Heat and really my faith in Bam Adebayo why I still think they're a top 4 team in the NBA right now. Coming in at number 3, I have the LA Clippers. They are the hottest starting team in the league right now besides Philadelphia. 5-2, number 1 seed in the Western Conference. The only reason why they're not top 2 is I know what happens in the playoffs with them. I know how good Kawhi is. I know how good Paul George is in the regular season. I'm going to struggle putting them at number 1 at any point during this season unless they're far and away have a better record than the Lakers or the Nets we'll get into in a minute here. But at the end of the day, man, the Clippers are just number 3 for me. I've seen it all. I know how good they can be on their best day. I need to see it in bigger games and specifically in the playoffs. So speaking of the Nets, I have them coming in at number 2, off to a losing record start, which is surprising to me, 3-4. Kyrie and KD have already taken some games off, though. There's also a quarantine issue with KD. I think when they're all there, when KD and Kyrie are both playing and they have their full roster at their disposal, we know how good they can be already. They've blown out a couple of teams, so I'm not going to buy into the slow start, 3-4. The Miami Heatles, I think, started 10-11 or something crazy like that, ended up winning 2 championships. So I'm not going to buy into like the week and everything like that, the slow starts, but I still think they're the second best team in basketball, and they're still my pick to come out of the Eastern Conference right now. And of course, number 1 is the LA Lakers, also off to a 5-2 start. This roster is the best roster from top to bottom. Schroeder looks incredible. Montrezl Harrell has had his moments already, and we already know what LeBron and AD do. Talen Horton-Tucker, awesome addition, awesome developmental story. He looks like a real player off the bench for them now. Everything about the Lakers just seems to be rolling right now, and they're definitely the best team in basketball, in my opinion, overall. That was my top 10 NBA list after the first about 2 weeks of the season. I'll try to do it once a week, maybe once every other week, where I give you my top 10 NBA teams, and that's where they all stand right now. That's going to do it for today's episode of the GSMC Sports Podcast, again brought to you by the GSMC Podcast Network. Before I let you go, don't forget to subscribe to the podcast, leave us a 5-star review, and follow us on all social media platforms, Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram. We would really appreciate it if you did all 3 of those things. Again, I have been your host, Alex Masfred. Thank you so much for tuning into today's episode, and I will see you all in the next one.
You've been listening to the Golden State Media Concepts Sports Podcast, part of the Golden State Media Concepts Podcast Network. You can find this show and others like it at www.gsmcpodcast.com. Download our podcast on iTunes, Stitcher, SoundCloud, and Google Play. Just type in GSMC to find all the shows from the Golden State Media Concepts Podcast Network, from movies to music, from sports to entertainment, and even weird news. You can also follow us on Twitter and on Facebook. Thank you, and we hope you have enjoyed today's program.